I want you to know someone who inspired a lot of us at the summit a year ago when he was on a panel sharing his experiences traveling all over the country to tea parties. Unlike the understandable confusion between Cecilia Thompson and Sarah Palin, this William Owens, for reasons that are obvious, is not often confused with William Owens, the governor of Colorado, whom we heard from the other night. But this William Owens has spoken at more than 200 tea parties since the movement got started a little over 2 years ago. And I mentioned to you yesterday that he's now the publisher of a valuable and very handsomely produced, pick one up at their table, magazine called Tea Party Review. TeaPartyReview.com has been assisting CentennialCCU.org in live streaming this summit all weekend. Greg Schaller just reported to me that as summit viewership has been monitored this morning, it's hovering just below or just over 200 people. It may not sound like a lot, but what that is a 20% increment upon those of us in the room, and it's kind of exciting to think that they're spread far and wide. Let's greet them with your applause. Yes, please. William Owens has written 7 books around the general theme of Christian maturity. He's a businessman. His company is called Higher Standard Enterprises, and his entrepreneurship is reflected in the work of Tea Party Review magazine and TeaPartyReview.com online. William and his wife Selena have been married for 25 years, and they're the parents of 4. They live in the Washington, D.C. area. To dispel all doubt about why he is not often confused with our governor, William Owens, of the same name, I bring him up now. William Owens.
Thank you so much, John. It's truly a pleasure to be here. I want to say thank you to the Centennial Institute, John, Bill Armstrong, and Joyce Beckett, along with a wonderful staff, for a relevant and professional produced summit. Let's give them a hand, please. You know, I've been here since the first event, and I will be back every year, especially the fact that they feed the vendors. That's a big bonus. I have been in this movement for quite some time, and before I introduce our speaker, I just want to tell you a little bit about what we do. You know, practically every speaker has had something to say about the history of our country or the reason why our ancestors came to America, and that was for opportunity. Though it wasn't for opportunity that my ancestors were brought here against their will, then I must believe it was for opportunity for me and my children now. Now, while I'm certain that many of your grand and great-grandparents are proud of your accomplishments, I'm confident that my great-grandparents that I never knew would be proud of mine and my children. My daughter Tiffany is research assistant to Marvin Alasky of World Magazine. She's also been selected to create a special section for World Magazine for the young generation in New York City. And believe me, she can handle it. My son recently graduated from Carson Long Military High School and has been accepted to Liberty University. And my dad, Bill Owens, of whom I speak to every day, heads up Education for All, an organization committed to bring school choice to inner city America. It is this common thread, thank you. It is this common thread of hope that hope becomes real, that binds us together. No matter how we got here and why, today we are Americans. Furthermore, for those who name the name of Christ as I do, we are brothers and sisters. In 2008, I wrote a book, Obama, Why Black America Should Have Doubts. It persuaded many who were both black and white to literally change their votes. In this book, I compared the ideology of Obama with black values, and it was a tremendous clash. All I can say is I told you so. An example of this today is that middle-class black America jobless rate is the same as it was in the Great Depression. And after being married to my wife now, we celebrate 26 years in October. Thank you. She's written a book called The Power Within a Conservative Woman. And it has been proven, and I believe we'll see it more today, just how powerful conservative women are, especially when you tick them off. As John mentioned, we've spoken at over 200 Tea Parties, and we've taken our abilities within the business realm to produce Tea Party Review magazine. It's the magazine of the movement. In fact, in back of this edition, we celebrate a body of students at Colorado, University of Colorado. And we show how they took, conservative students at that college took 34 of the 36 seats available. And they were all conservatives. So go, young people. I encourage you to visit our booth today, take a look at our magazines, get a subscription. We'll give you one for free, but you have to give it to a liberal friend. And when you tell them the publisher is black, that'll certainly challenge them. We also are live streaming, as John has mentioned. We're live streaming authors, presidential candidates, authors, and even inventors of games. We're bringing the reality of the American voice to the internet through our live stream. So we invite you to our booths to see what we have to offer. If you're a blogger, a writer, hey, you might even be an investor. That's what entrepreneurship is about, and I'd love to meet you. Now it gives me the great honor to introduce our speaker to you today. Who, we are asking each other, are you voting for in 2012? Because of the state of our country, this question will be most important because it's going to revolutionize where we go from here. The next president of the United States will either turn the systemic destructive culture of Washington around, or they will secure the demise of America as we know it. This view is shared by many experts today. Having graduated from Morehouse College in 1967 with a Bachelor's of Arts degree in mathematics, and received a Master's of Science degree in computer science from Purdue University in '71, while he was also working full-time in ballistics for the U.S. Department of Navy. He authored 4 books: Leadership is Common Sense, Speak as a Leader, CEO of Self, They Think You're Stupid. After completing his master's degree from Purdue, he left the Department of Navy and began working for the Coca-Cola Company as a business analyst. In '77, he joined Pillsbury, where he rose to the position of vice president by the early '80s. He left his executive post to work for Burger King, managing 400 stores in Philadelphia area. Under his leadership, his region went from the least profitable for Burger King to the most profitable in just 3 years. He was then appointed president and CEO of Godfather's Pizza. Within 14 months, he had returned Godfather's to profitability. It's a skill America could use right now. He continued as CEO until '96, when he resigned to become CEO of the National Restaurant Association, a trade group and lobby organization for the restaurant industry, where he previously had been chairman concurrent with his role at Godfather's. This led to a most telling event that would position him as an anti-establishment leader. It was in 1994, as head of the National Restaurant Association, he had the opportunity to speak with President Clinton during a nationally televised town hall meeting. Here, he challenged the president regarding the impact on business of his healthcare overhaul proposal if it was passed. President Clinton attempted to assure him and the American millions of viewers watching at home that his legislation would not harm the Americans and business owners as well as the employees. He was skeptical. And I quote, "Quite honestly, Mr. President, your calculations are incorrect," he said. "In the competitive marketplace, it simply doesn't work that way." His words echoed across America, and Newsweek named him the primary saboteur of Hillary Care. He clearly states that one of his primary motivators is taking on the challenge that's set before him is not only for his, but also for ours, and those are our grandchildren. Before I introduce this gentleman, he has a new book that's coming out. And the information about the book is going to be passed out to you, and he will also be signing this book, which will be mailed to you upon its completion, which is very soon. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce to you a man worthy of your deepest consideration for the next president of the United States of America, Herman Cain.
Thank you. Thank you. My. Thank you very much. Love y'all. Love you. Thank you. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Life from conception. Liberty based upon the Constitution as written. And the pursuit of happiness, not a guarantee. Last time I checked, I don't think the founders intended for there to be a Department of Happy in Washington, D.C. It said the pursuit of happiness, just like my parents pursued happiness in this great nation, just like your parents pursued happiness and wanted to give you a little bit better start in life, like my folks wanted to give my brother and I a little bit better start. Dad walked off of a farm at the age of 18, literally, with just the clothes on his back. He ended up in Atlanta, married to my mother, who was a domestic worker. Dad was a barber, a janitor, and a chauffeur all at the same time, because Dad used the only kind of equity he had in order to achieve his American dreams: sweat equity. Dad worked 3 jobs, one to put food on the table, one to keep a roof over our head, and that third job to save for his dreams, not his brothers and sisters' dreams, his dreams. One of Dad's dreams was to one day own a whole house. You see, growing up in Atlanta, we lived in what my brother and I used to affectionately call a half a house. It was a 6-room house with 3 rooms on one side, 3 rooms on the other side, with a wall going down the middle. We lived in half of it. My brother and I used to say to Dad, "Dad, why do we live in a half a house?" He said, "It's a duplex." "But Dad, we only live in half the house." "It's a duplex." I'll never forget the day that Dad came home and told my mother, my brother, and I, "Get in the car." We got in the car. You don't argue with Dad. Man working 3 jobs isn't usually home on Saturdays anyway. Got in the car. Dad drove about 35 minutes west on Bankhead Highway in Atlanta. About 35 minutes later, he pulled onto a little street called Albert Street. Stopped in front of the 3rd house on the right. A little brick house, not attached to another house, with grass growing around it. And Dad said, "This is our new home." We said, "What?" We couldn't believe it. My brother and I was in 8th grade, my brother was 6th grade. We jumped out of the car, ran up to the front door of the house. Dad got out of the house and walked up very proudly. Put the key in the front door, don't you know. Went inside. Dad announced to my brother and I, he said, "It has 2 bedrooms, one for you boys, and one for your mom and me. And I'm going to buy y'all twin beds. Twin beds? We thought we'd died and gone to heaven. You see, living in the duplex, my brother and I slept on a cot in the kitchen, and every evening we'd argue over who was supposed to let it out. And every morning we would argue over who's supposed to take it up. Now Dad was going to buy us twin beds. My mother was in tears of joy. She too had left the farm at the age of 18 with just the clothes on her back. She didn't know Dad had saved enough money to buy that house. She didn't even know that Dad had gone out and bought the house. Don't try that today, men. Won't work. You'll be living in that sucker by yourself. Dad could get away with that. Imagine going home telling your wife, sweetheart, I bought you a house brand new that you've never seen before. Oh, no, you didn't. And when your wife or your significant other puts their hands on the hips and the neck start moving, you in a heap of trouble. But that was one of Dad's dreams. Never heard him play the victim card or what the government's going to do for me. The pursuit of happiness is one of the greatest privileges we have in this great nation. When the founding fathers conceived those words, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. They set the bar high. They may not have been living up to that ideal at the time, but they set it high, believing that the spirit of America would move this nation toward that ideal, and we are at that ideal because of the greatness of America. But the pursuit of happiness is under attack in many ways. We have become a nation of crises. We have a moral crisis. We have an economic crisis. We have an entitlement spending crisis. We have an energy crisis. We have an immigration crisis. We have a foggy foreign policy crisis. And worst of all, we have a severe deficiency of leadership crisis in the White House and Washington, D.C. And if you don't believe we have a severe deficiency of leadership crisis, just take a look at what happened the last couple of weeks. I often get challenged by some skeptics who do not believe that I have a serious chance in this race. But Mr. Cain, you've never held public office before. That's right. The ones in Washington, D.C., they have. How's that working out for you? The American people are saying previous experience messing up the nation is not necessarily required. And so when I delineate the fact that I am the anti-establishment candidate, I didn't have immediate name ID nationally. It's moving up. I don't have a cajillion dollars, but we're raising money. And I have never held political office before, and I happen to believe, along with a lot of people, that maybe it's time, instead of another politician running the nation, why don't we send a problem solver to Washington, D.C.? That's what I've done throughout my career. And I have this undying faith in the American people that the media and the establishment, that they are not going to select the next nominee. The next nominee and the next president is going to be selected by that sleeping giant that has awakened called We the People. We the people are going to select the nominee and the next president of the United States of America. Now, I happen to believe that those skills that successful people use to fix stuff, to lead stuff, turn around stuff, that's what I've done all of my career. And I happen to believe that it's resonating with people. For example, what would I do about this sluggish, anemic economy? The first thing that this president and this administration does not realize is that the business sector is the engine to economic growth. That's the engine. And instead of putting fuel in the engine, this president and this administration have done nothing but put baggage in the caboose of the train. Healthcare deform, $1 trillion in stimulus spending, regulatory deform act, popcorn programs, cash for clunkers, cash for air. There was a cash for air, but many of you all didn't qualify. All of these popcorn projects and all of these failed policies in the caboose. And if you put stuff in the caboose and don't fuel the engine, the economy is not going to grow. This is why we got this anemic report recently. The second quarter, 1.3 or 4%. Anemic. And then they had to revise down the first quarter anemic growth. Here's how you put fuel in the engine, folks. First, lower the top corporate and personal income tax rate to a maximum of 25%. Maximum of 25%. Secondly, suspend all taxes on foreign repatriated profits that are generated overseas that are dying to come home, but companies do not want to pay double taxation. Number three, take the capital gains tax rate to zero. Don't cut it, zero. And then here's the most important part of phase one of this economic vision that I have. Make them permanent, because uncertainty is killing this economy. We are certainly in a slump. Make them permanent. Now that's phase one. Phase two, totally replace the tax code with the fair tax, which is a consumption tax, which is a national retail sales tax. Whenever I describe this economic vision inside the Beltway, I get a lot of skeptics. They usually say, well, that sounds good, but you can't do that. And I go, why? Well, you don't know how Washington works. I said, yes, I do. It doesn't. So do I need to go and learn how it does not work? And I said, secondly, I am confident that we are going to be able to pass this because I'm going to use a different approach as president of the United States of America. I'm going to be the people's president. And what that means is, when I put that proposal on the table and explain it to the American people, I'm reminded of something that was popularized by former Senator Eric Dirksen when he said, when they feel the heat, they will see the light. You see, my job is to put common sense ideas before the public and before the United States Congress, and then make sure that the American people understand the legislation, that they understand these ideas, and then you be the heat. You will bring the heat to the United States Congress for good common sense ideas. That's how we get Washington changed. So that's my economic vision. My approach to all of these crises is the same. Make sure we're working on the right problem. Make sure that I surround myself with good people and great people who understand how to lead, who understand how to solve problems. And if you surround yourself with the right people, you'll put together the right plans in order to be able to fix some of these crises that we have. Let's take energy as an example. President Obama went to Brazil recently, loaned them $2 billion plus some change, announced to the Brazilians that the United States was going to be Brazil's best customer with the oil they are going to drill with our money. Let me tell you what the Cain doctrine is. America will be its own best customer in coal, oil, gas, natural gas, all of our resources, because we can become energy independent. We don't need to depend upon folk who don't like us. Energy independence. The skeptics tell me that I can't do that either. You know, all my life I've had people telling me what I could not do. And to quote my wife of 43 years, that's the last thing they should tell you. Tell him he can't do something, you better get out of the way. But here's how we're going to do it. We know that the reason that we don't have an energy independent strategy is because we don't have the leadership, we don't have the will. There are people who are trying to choke our resources off. It's already been documented that we have the resources if we were to maximize them, but we got to get government out of the way, off our backs, and out of our pockets. That's what we've got to do in order to open up the development of these resources. So when the skeptics say, well, you can't do that, I said, why? Well, because of the EPA. Well, I have a little solution for that too. You know, when you are a businessman, you anticipate barriers so you can remove those barriers before you get there. I'm going to have a regulatory reduction commission and I'm already taking applications. But in order to qualify for this commission, which will have the mission of defining how we get the EPA back in the barn because it's gone wild, you know that and I know that. In order to qualify as a candidate that might be selected for this commission, I'm looking for people who have been abused by the EPA. Farmers, oil people, coal people. If you've had to deal with them, you are a candidate for this commission, because we're going to remove that barrier, or we're going to make it work on behalf of the people and business, not on behalf of government. We can become energy independent. I don't have enough time today, because I'm looking forward to Dick Morris's comments, good friend, to go through every one of those crises, but that's how I will approach every one of them. Whether we're talking about foreign policy, whether we're talking about immigration. Let me give you my immigration one real quickly. We know that that's an issue. Whenever you've heard in the past the language comprehensive immigration reform, that's code for they don't know what to do. Because it starts with, as I said, working on the right problem or problems. Relative to immigration, we don't have one problem. We've got four. Number one, secure the border. Seriously, secure the border. I got criticized by some writers because they said I was being insensitive when I said that I want to secure the border using a combination of technology, a real fence, and troops with guns. That's insensitive. And my response was no, it's insensitive for our citizens to be killed by people who are coming into this country illegally. That's what's insensitive. I'm not going to apologize for protecting our citizens. Secure the border. Secondly, enforce the laws that are already there. Number 3, promote the path to citizenship that's already there. We don't need a new path to citizenship, which is code for amnesty. There will be no amnesty in the Cain administration. Let's clean up the bureaucracy so people can come through the front door and stop sneaking through the back door and the side door. Secure the border. Enforce the laws that are already there. Promote the path to citizenship that's already there by cleaning up the bureaucracy. And number 4, how do we deal with the illegals that are already here? Empower the states to do what the federal government won't do and can't do. Give the power to the states to deal with your illegal alien population. And I happen to believe that we will then be able to get our hands around this problem. But in all of these issues we face, folks, let's start with working on the right problem. Having the right people. Many of you have heard that President Obama, 7% of his appointees and cabinet members had a real job before they became an appointee. 7. And we wonder why the policies aren't working. Well, I can tell you that under the Cain administration, it's going to be 93% will be people who have had real jobs, who have led, who have done things, who signed a paycheck, who have built companies, who have created jobs. Those are the people I'm going to surround myself with. But the approach is the same. This nation is on the wrong track because the pursuit of happiness is under attack. Not only with some of the things that I've already identified, but some others that make absolutely no sense. Our very free market system is under attack. When you have the federal government through one of its agencies trying to intimidate a company, Boeing, into not building in a work-free state, something is wrong with that. When governments start tampering with the free market system, we've got to change some things and change them now. But I was talking to some friends yesterday at another event, and they were asking, but do you think it's too late? No, I do not believe it's too late, folks. That's one of the reasons I was inspired to run. Because, you see, the Founding Fathers also expressed some other great vision and great wisdom. When you get to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, I had a caller to my radio show call one night and said, Mr. Cain, I'm frustrated. I said, what are you frustrated about? I believe that the country is on the wrong track, but I don't know what to do about it. I said, well, I can give you some suggestions. Are you a registered voter? Yes. Do you vote regularly? Yes. Do you study the candidates to try to pick the best candidate? Yes. I said, are you familiar with the Declaration of Independence? He said, yes, sir. I said, go get a copy. Okay. And I'm sitting here whistling on the radio while he gets his copy of the Declaration of Independence. He comes, I got it, sir. I said, now here's what else you can do. Turn to the section that says life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. He said, I found it. Then keep reading. Because it says, when any form of government becomes destructive of those ideals, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish them. We've got some altering and some abolishing to do. Altering and abolishing. We will alter control of the United States Senate. We will maintain control of the United States House. We will have a new president in the White House in 2012. Let me give you a little hint who that's going to be. Hope and change ain't working. I think the American people are ready for Hope and Cain. Real leadership, real experience. It's not too late, folks. And that simply means that all of us have got to crank it up a notch, as Emeril Lagasse says. That's why I got involved. When I was growing up, I didn't grow up saying that I wanted to be president one day. My American dream was to make me some money, because I didn't have any. That was my American dream. I wanted to retire comfortably, and I almost did, until the nation got on the wrong track. Strange things happen on the way to cruise control of your life. You start thinking about the children and the grandchildren. And then even during the last presidential election, it never occurred to me that I wanted to run for president of the United States. But there were two significant events that have happened in my life, actually three significant events that inspired me to make this big step. The first one happened 12 years ago, and I didn't know what it meant. 12 years ago, my first grandchild was born. I was at a meeting in Hawaii, a board meeting with the National Restaurant Association, where I used to be the president and CEO. And so we were living in Omaha, Nebraska at the time, and my wife said that she wouldn't go to the meeting with me because our daughter was living in Atlanta, and she didn't want to be that far away so she could be there for the blessed event. Y'all been down that road. And so sure enough, the last day of the board meeting, I was getting ready to conduct the board meeting for the National Restaurant Association. I got a call from my wife just before I went into the board meeting. She said, well, Melanie's going into labor. I said, I knew it. So she said, I'm going to Atlanta. I said, okay. I said, when I get there, the blessed event will probably be over with, because I had to finish the board meeting, and I had another meeting in Texas on the way back. I'd already pre-planned it because I didn't know the baby was going to try to come, but we kind of expected it. So it took me 3 days to get back to Atlanta. And after the first day, I called home and talked to my son, and I said, Vincent, do we have a baby yet? No, Dad. Well, okay. That was just only 24 hours. And so I went on and waited till the next day, and I called and said, Vincent, do we have a baby yet? No, Dad, we don't have a baby yet. I said, is Melanie okay? Yes. Is everything going well? Yes. Why don't we have a baby yet? It's been 2 days. He said, Dad, it's a slow baby. I know that. I'm getting worried. So then on the third day, I got up that morning, I called, Vincent, do we have a baby yet? Not yet, Dad, but everything is going great. So I went on and finished my meeting that I had in Texas, caught a flight later that afternoon, January 22nd, 1999. Got on the plane, landed in Atlanta at 8:30 p.m. Jumped in a car, arrived at Piedmont Hospital at 9:30 p.m. Went up to the waiting room. My son was there. My wife was in with my daughter and my son-in-law. And I said, Vincent, do we have a baby yet? Not yet, Dad. I sat down and started talking with my son. At 9:56, my wife comes out of the delivery room, puts her hands on her hips. You know where this is going. Didn't say, hello, honey, hello, darling, glad you had a safe trip. Nothing. Hands on the hips. You have a granddaughter. Good. What's with the attitude You have a granddaughter. Is Melanie okay? Yes. Is the baby okay? Yes. Well, why the attitude? She said, I've been with this girl for 3 days. And you show up and the baby is born. She was waiting on granddad to come into the world. My wife said, I know that. And I have to hear that story for the rest of my life. I said, but it is a great story. She was waiting on granddad. Would you like to see your new granddaughter? Yes. Went inside. Melanie, you okay? Yes, Dad. How's the baby? Fine. Would you like to hold her? You're going to ask her, Grandpa, would he like to hold her? Yeah. I took this little 15-minute-old baby in my arms, looked in that little face, and the first thought, so help me God, that went through my mind wasn't, what do I do to give her a good start in life? Wasn't, what do I do to make sure she gets a good education? The first thought that went through my mind, what do I do to make this a better world and a better nation? And I didn't know the answer. That was 12 years ago. That was 12 years ago. And then when President Barack Obama took office, and I watched the rapid weakening of America, I could not just sit there having achieved my American dreams and not do what I could do. My challenge to you is you do what you can do. We all have been blessed with some time on this planet. We've all been blessed with some talents and some treasures. We have a responsibility to use our time, talents, and treasures to make this a better world in whatever capacity we can. And as I watched the weakening of America by this president, and I thought about looking into my granddaughter's face for the very first time, I knew that I had to do some serious praying about what I would do, and came to the conclusion that I needed to step up from this nice, comfortable lifestyle and give the American people another alternative, a problem solver instead of a politician. And I know that you all are going to be voting in a straw poll. If you haven't already, it's an opportunity for you to send a message to Washington, D.C. Status quo or new leadership in Washington, D.C. And the reason that I believe that I'm going to be the Republican nominee is because this has and will continue to be a grassroots, bottoms-up campaign. I told you earlier, I plan to be a president of the people, by the people, for the people. And that's how we change Washington, D.C. And for those that are wondering, because you may have read some of these slanderous articles on the internet, my campaign is going great. Name ID has gone from 21% to 48% in the last 8 weeks. Half the people don't even know me yet. Half of the people that are paying attention, they don't know me yet. And whenever I see a report about President Obama's disapproval rating, I think the latest was 40%. Now, some people will mistakenly say, oh man, that's good. He's down to 40%. No, here's how I interpret that. That means 40% of the people are clueless about being in the wrong direction, and those are the same people who are going to vote for him again. We have got to outvote them. This is how we take this nation back. And so I believe that I have been blessed. You have been blessed. You've been able to pursue your American dream. And so my concluding comments are, it's not about us. it's not about us. It's about the children and the grandchildren. And you see, the founding fathers, they got it right. They were the founding fathers. We are charged with being the defending fathers of the Declaration. We must defend the Constitution. We must defend the life of the unborn. We must be the defending fathers such that the American dream will live on. I'm optimistic that it will, because of the spirit of America. The spirit of America coming from the people has brought us through some turbulent times all throughout our young 235-year history. And it's that same spirit of America that I believe is going to take America back. My grandfather lived to be 94 years of age. My maternal grandmother lived to be 104. My father only lived to be 56 years of age because he literally worked himself into bad health and didn't live a long, long life. But he achieved his dreams. One of them was that half a house. One of his other dreams was for his son to become an executive in a major corporation. And his son became an executive in 4 major corporations. Dad and mom are smiling down, saying, that's our boy. And I want to be smiling down one day at our children and our grandchildren, saying, we did our part to save this great nation. Because I happen to believe we are an exceptional nation, and we will remain an exceptional nation. In God we trust, and in God is our trust. This is the United States of America.
Herman Cain. Herman Cain.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Wow. Thanks, John. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. We can do about 3.
Yeah.
2 or 3. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Cain, I don't know anything about pizza or burgers. I know a little bit about politics, and something tells me you just help yourself in the straw poll. But speaking of restaurants, I'm sitting next to my daughter who's in the restaurant business, and I leaned over and said, honey, what do you think? She said, well, it's great, and shouldn't it be? He's a restaurant man. But I think that we need now to go to some questions because Herman Cain has yet to tell us what he really thinks. Rise, wait to be viewed by the big internet audience, and if they know what's good for them, they will have crashed our server watching the speech that we just heard. Rise and wait for the microphone and ask your question, please.
I have a question. Yesterday, John Bolton compellingly talked about what he feels is the #1 issue is our national security. And I would just like you to comment on that and ask you if he might be a candidate for Secretary of State or one of those wonderful positions.
Let me answer the second question first. John Bolton would be a candidate for anything he wanted to in my administration. Brilliant man. I don't know what he told you, but here's my perspective on foreign policy. It's foggy. I believe that we must first clearly define who our friends are and who our enemies are. We do not need to keep giving money to our enemies and people who don't like us. Once we clarify that, we need to clarify the relationship. What I mean by clarifying the relationship, what will we do if A happens, if B happens? We need to be in a position to respond proactively rather than reacting to all of this stuff going on around the world. We have to take each country individually. Let's start with Afghanistan. I happen to believe that we've got 3 major challenges in Afghanistan. Here we go with this work on the right problem thing again. We have the military presence there that we need to leave the right way. I don't think this is the right way to do it. Go and announce to the enemy that we're going to draw down our troop level by a third in a year just to fulfill a campaign promise. Secondly, we've got some issues with the government itself. We don't know who to trust at times. We know that you've got Taliban there. Sometimes the ones that we believe are our friends, sometimes they'll say one thing and they'll say another. We've got to clarify that. And then we've also got to manage the relationship between Pakistan and Afghanistan because Pakistan got a nuclear weapon. We can't let this nuclear arms race get out of hand because as soon as some of these smaller countries like Iran start to develop their own nuclear weapon, you're going to have every other small country wanting to develop their nuclear weapon. And so every country, we need to take a close look. I would have listened to the generals. Because remember when President Obama announced this troop withdrawal in Afghanistan, both Admiral Mullen and General Petraeus said, and I quote, "It was more aggressive than they expected." That soldier talk for, he didn't listen to us. Let's look at Libya. Libya has turned into a debacle. The United States, a la President Obama, who represents us, we are caught between a rock and a hard place. But the first thing that I would do is talk to our soldiers and commanders on the ground, talk to our intelligence people, get the necessary information to make a determination. Do we just get out of there because it's a no-win situation, or is there some other plan? One of the things that I've always done is not shoot from the lip. So you won't hear me shooting from the lip when it comes to foreign policy or on any other issue. John, who's next? Let's go to this side. How about? Yes.
Thank you. First off, thank you for taking your time to be here. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Second, on the economic reforms or economic issues that you were talking about before, you listed 4 items. One of the things that I noticed that was left out was Obamacare from your discussion, and also the Frank Dodd bill and the regulatory reform that's been going on in the financial industry. What about those items?
I only left them out because of time constraints, but repealing Obamacare would be one of the first pieces of legislation that I asked from Congress. Repeal Dodd-Frank. Also, the reason that I believe Obamacare needs to be totally repealed is because it's worse than Hillary Care, which I and many of you fought back in the early 1990s. It cannot be fixed or saved. It needs to be repealed and replaced with market-driven, patient-centered ideas. This is how we bring down the cost. For example, make deductibility under the current tax code the same for whoever, regardless of who buys it. It shouldn't matter whether the employer buy it or the employee buy it or somebody that's unemployed buy it. Deductibility of health insurance premium should be the same. Number 2, expand medical savings accounts. Don't restrict medical savings accounts. Number 3, allow insurance to be sold across state lines in order to create more national competition. Number 4, allow association health plans. Association health plans can be better tailored to specific associations. And then number 5, pass loser pay laws so doctors can stop practicing defensive medicine. That's just a starter set for how we deal with it. Now, the Dodd-Frank regulatory reform bill. I have three major problems with it, which is why I think we need to repeal it and do it the right way this time. And if they had listened to people like Representative Paul Ryan of Wisconsin, they would have gotten it right. But they didn't listen to him. Three major problems with why I think it needs to be repealed. Number one, it does not even address Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which is the catalyst for the financial meltdown that we went through in the first place. And here are the other two things, and this will have to be my last question. The other two problems with that Dodd-Frank regulatory bill, Dodd and Frank.
Herman Cain.